Many CSS designs will set the font family property to the name of a specific font, like Arial. However, there's always a chance that the specific font you want, like Arial, that it's not available on a given user system. And that's one of the reasons you can specify as many fonts as you like in a comma-delimited list, and the browser will use the first one that matches. In this sample on the screen, we have a first choice, a second choice, and if neither of those fonts are available, we are falling back to the generic sans serif, because even if the browser doesn't have any of the other fonts, it must provide a default font for that category. Of course, this raises the question of what fonts are safe to use for web design. Generally speaking, you can't go wrong with Arial, Verdana, Times, and Courier, but I've also provided a list here of other fonts that are commonly available on multiple platforms. Helvetica is a common font that you'll see listed in many style sheets, but Helvetica is not available on Windows. Windows provides Arial instead. Let's take a look at the font settings on these websites that we visited earlier. I'll start with Twitter. Inside of Chrome, what I can do is select an area like this and right-click and say Inspect Element. That'll bring up the developer tools that we looked at earlier in this course, and that will tell me what font family is in effect. It's down here at the bottom for Twitter. The font is Lucidia Grande or sans serif, depending on what is available. And we'll talk about what the 0.75 EM is in just a bit. Let's also look at Google. Its search results are displaying with a font family of Arial, or basically then any sans serif font that's available. Let's take a look at the Smithsonian Magazine. Its font is Georgia, or Times New Roman, or any serif font. You can see that Times New Roman, when you have spaces in the font family name, you can enclose that in quotes. And finally, let's look at the Yahoo News. We'll inspect this element. And we can see here the font family is Georgia, or Times New Roman, or then just a font from the serif category. Something else that you might have picked up on is that we talked about inherited properties earlier in this course, and font family is one of those properties that is inherited. So if I set it at the body level, then the paragraphs and the divs and the anchors that are inside of that body will pick up that font family by default unless I override it. So for instance, this header here, this H1 tag, it is inheriting the font family from the body, but it doesn't have to be that way. I could say that for the H1, the font family should be Times New Roman, comma serif, and refresh the page, and you can see that it has a different style than the rest of the web page. And what does happen when you specify a font that doesn't exist? And let me make sure that I put Times New Roman inside of a quote here. I will ask for a font that doesn't exist. You can see that's not going to produce an error on the page. The browser is simply going to move on to the next font and try to pick it up.